Can I hear a yes? Am I audible?
Good morning, sir.
Yeah. Did your class reps give you the topic from beforehand?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. See, I gave it a day or a couple of days before so that you people are not too unfamiliar with the subject and you read a little bit and come. Otherwise, it's a one-sided conversation as in the class with the teacher speaking and you guys just listening in and then closing the computer as soon as he or she goes away. So we have another very important, in fact, all the topics are important in communicable diseases till now, whatever has been covered. Because India is a country where, all these diseases are, you can say, endemic. We don't even bother to think about them if we get diarrhea, if we get malaria, if we get tuberculosis, if we get, dengue. So these are things that are so common, but then as a young doctor or even as a specialist, you people have to deal with the diseases, and so you should know about the epidemiology and remember the epidemiology of all these diseases in future also. Diarrhea is a very, very common disease. It's a killer in under 5 age group, and I can bet that during your internship, wherever you do it, in a busy or a not so busy hospital, you will definitely see children coming to you with the complaints of diarrhea. Definition: diarrhea is the passage of loose, liquid, or watery stools, usually more than 3 times a day. Recent change in consistency and character of stools is important and not the number. Me and you also get some loose stools once in a while, right? But what is important is the frequency, the number of times in a day, more than 3 times, and recent change in consistency and character, right, of the stools. So remember, this definition is not complete in a viva or in a theoric, answer when you say loose, liquid, watery stools more than 3 times a day. You got to add the second sentence, that is change in consistency and character. If it lasts more than 3 weeks, it's called chronic, right? Attack of sudden onset lasting usually for 3 to 7 days, but may last up to a fortnight is called as acute. So probably 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks is acute, and more than 3 weeks is chronic, right? So this is the WHO definition of acute diarrhea, chronic diarrhea. We will go a little bit further. Clinical types of diarrheal diseases: acute watery, acute bloody, persistent diarrhea, and diarrhea with severe malnutrition. Please remember, this is an exam question. There are 4 categories of diarrheal diseases: acute watery, several hours to days it can last, dehydration and weight loss, and I have given the culprits: cholera, E. coli, and rota, right? Acute bloody is also called as dysentery. There is a damage to intestinal mucosa, there is sepsis, and that's why blood is seen in the stools, right? Malnutrition may be an added factor, mostly seen in Shigella. Persistent diarrhea, 14 days or more. It is not acute, it is not chronic we are talking about here. We define that in a different way. But persistent diarrhea, 14 days or more, malnutrition and non-intestinal infection, right? People with HIV may develop this type of disease. Sorry. Diarrhea with severe malnutrition, something which is a little rare because you don't see cases of malnutrition in children so often as in the previous years. But then, this is also a classification for third world countries where severe systemic infection, dehydration, even problems in the heart, and there is micronutrient deficiency. So please remember, diarrhea can be acute, it can be chronic, the definition of diarrhea, and the clinical types can be acute watery, dysentery or acute bloody, persistent diarrhea, and diarrhea with severe malnutrition. If you have remembered this, it's a big thing because this is the first thing that we ask in the exam. Diarrhea is a major killer in under 5s. Me and you, relatively safer because we are above 5 years old. 9% of all under 5 mortality in the world is because of diarrhea. 9% of all under 5 mortality in the world is because of diarrhea. In India, about 10% of all under 5 deaths is diarrhea. So India is matching the international standards or perhaps is a little overboard. 3 episodes per child per year happens every year. If you have a small child in the family, if you remember your childhood days, perhaps we all had about 3 episodes of diarrheal diseases in a year. But we are fortunate. We were born in families where our parents are educated, they looked after us, and we probably escaped this average of 3 episodes. But if you go to the community in the village, the rural area, the urban slums, you will find children with 3 or more episodes of diarrhea in a year. The silver lining in the cloud is that the overall mortality has reduced because of a wonder drug or a wonderful thing called as class. What am I hinting at?
Uh,
Why has overall mortality reduced?
ORS, sir.
Yes, I'm glad somebody has applied. I can't see you, otherwise I would have complimented you. Many of you know it, but few express it. Please start talking. Please start expressing. In medical, profession, we got to talk. India has 10% of all under 5 deaths because of diarrhea. In 2017, as per your book, about 13 million cases of diarrhea happened in India, and about 1,300 died. So you can find out the case fatality rate, a very, very common terminology with COVID nowadays, right? The agents are many. Okay, there can be viruses, there can be bacteria, and there can be so many other things. These are the common viruses: Rota, Astro, Adeno, Calci, Corona. Okay, remember Corona. If you recall whatever you read about this novel coronavirus which is going on right now, besides the fever and the respiratory symptoms, one of the symptoms which the CDC also agreed a little later is diarrhea. Norwalk group of viruses: enterovirus, cytomegalovirus, EHEC, okay, Clostridium difficile, EI, enteroinvasive E. coli, Aeromonas, Yersinia enterocolitica, chlamydia, and even Neisseria gonorrhoeae. So these are the various bacteria which are causing diarrhea, and these are the viruses. There are some more bacteria. We will come to that. Campylobacter, Escherichia coli. I have defined EC in various ways, but in general, E. coli, Shigella, Salmonella, Vibrio cholera, Parahemolyticus, Bacillus cereus, Staph aureus. We will read a little bit about food poisoning in another class. We will talk about cholera in another class. So you will learn more about cholera and food poisoning and all these things a little in detail later on. And of course, Clostridium perfringens. So these are the various bacteria. We talked about the viruses, and there are other agents. We will talk about them also in the intestinal chapter. Enteromoeba histolytica, Giardia intestinalis, Trichuriasis, Cryptosporidium, and intestinal worms. So these are the various things which cause diarrhea. These are the other agents. Now, major pathogens in children. This is the table given in your book. If you see, Rota is right on top. Therefore, we have introduced rotavirus vaccine in the national schedule. We have enterotoxic E. coli, Shigella, Clostridium jejuni, Vibrio cholera, Salmonella, non-typhoid, and enteropathogenic E. coli as the bacteria which are more common in children. Cryptosporidium is the protozoan, and in 20 to 30% of the cases, you don't find a specific pathogen. But remember, it's difficult because we have limited investigative facilities, and therefore please go with Rota, please go with certain bacteria when you see a case of diarrhea. You have to cover him up with some antibiotics. As far as antivirals are concerned, it's a decision you got to take. Bacillary dysentery caused by Shigella. Group of non-gram-negative, non-motile organisms are divided into 4 groups: Shigella dysentery, Shigella flexnera, Shigella boydii, and Shigella sonnei. This is just an added thing. Amoebiasis means harboring a protozoan parasite, Enter-amoebica histolytica, with or without clinical manifestations. We will read about amoebiasis separately. Intestinal amoebiasis includes dysentery, dysenteric colitis, amoeboma, amoebic appendicitis, and various complications, right? Giardiasis, we'll also cover in a separate chapter, is a recognized cause of diarrhea. It's flourishing in the duodenum and jejunum, right? And then abnormally frequent and watery stools often result from chemical, nutritional, metabolic, or psychogenic stimuli. Remember the diarrhea before the exams, okay? when we are stressed out, we haven't covered a part of the portion, the huge portion, we often go to the loo. So therefore, psychogenic stimuli. Sometimes we eat a normal fruit or something, it is coated with wax and some chemical, or maybe a vegetable, we get a chemical kind of reaction in our body which causes diarrhea. So you may not pinpoint a bacteria or a virus. There are other agents like chemicals or some psychogenic stimuli which may cause diarrhea. Remember the causes, very important. Man is the reservoir of most pathogens, and I have given the pathogens here. For some pathogens, animal and human feces both harbor the agent, and these are Clostridium jejuni, Salmonella, and Enterocolitica. Right? So please remember, man is the most important reservoir, me and you, and some cases animal reservoirs are also there besides human feces. Mostly seen in children between 6 months and 2 years. So that is if you see under fives, that's a broad age group. Now in the under fives, between 6 months and 2 years is the most vulnerable age group. Incidence is highest in the 6 to 11 month period, that is later part of infancy, when the weaning takes place. The child is being breastfed. After 6 months, the mother is trying to switch over the child to the complementary foods, besides reducing breastfeeding or sometimes even stopping it in case of a working mother or something. So therefore, the incidence is highest in this weaning period because of the change of diet. More common in those with malnutrition, and of course the added curses that man has with him in a poor country like ours, and now poorer because of the COVID, are poverty, prematurity in children, reduced gastric acidity, immunodeficiency, lack of personal and domestic hygiene. That's why we are stressing on hand hygiene and masks and regular bath and sanitation and cleaning your area and the house, and incorrect feeding procedures, right? So the mother doesn't know how to feed the child, what all foods to introduce, what to introduce at one at a time during weaning. So these are all supposed to be told by me and you as medical officers to the mother. There are so many types of clientele you will meet. Some of them are knowledgeable, some of them are not. So you will have to cater to the later half of the clientele, and you will have to tell them. In case you don't, and in case the child lands up with some problem, perhaps we are also to blame. So therefore, incorrect feeding procedures is one of the most important factors causing diarrhea in under fives or in infants. Susceptibility. Man has no natural immunity against organisms of diarrhea and dysentery. Me and you both can recall that we have often had diarrhea once or twice in a year, or once or twice in 5 years, or once or twice in a month. Okay, so we have no natural immunity. We have diarrhea once, doesn't give you an immunity. Both sexes are equally susceptible. Children and the aged suffer more. I need not specify the reasons. About children, I've already told you. Transient immunity develops against actual strain of Shigella, but that is only a transient, thing. Although susceptibility to infections of Enteromoeba histolytica is general, many persons harboring the organisms do not develop the disease. We may get amoebiasis, a couple of times or maybe more, but many individuals like me and you harboring the organism within them do not develop the disease. They are, you can say, carriers. Environment, there's nothing to stress. We all know India is blessed with a tropical climate, and therefore rotavirus occurs all through the year. Bacterial diarrheas in the warmer and rainy months. Do we have a winter? Do we have any specific rainy month? No, it rains in November. So therefore rotavirus occurs all throughout the year, and even you can safely write that bacterial diarrheas in children can occur all through the year. In case it is a rather warm day or rather a warm season or a very, very rainy season, you may find bacterial infections a little more. In the temperate climates like Europe and the other cooler nations, you will find in summers it is bacterial. I need not stress, because in India the pattern is the same, and in winters it is more of viral. Persistent diarrhea has same seasonal pattern as acute watery diarrhea. So there's no separate seasonal pattern for the different types of diarrhea. You can say in the warmer months the bacteria they thrive, and all through the year in India, because we mostly have a tropical climate, it's the rotavirus. Mode of transmission. Infection by all organisms of this group of diseases is invariably by fecal-oral route. We don't wash our hands after defecation. We don't wash our hands frequently. We don't wash our hands after touching an object. We put the food in our hands and we put it in the mouth. So therefore, fecal-oral route is the most common form of transmission. All of you know this. I need not stress it again. It may be waterborne, it may be foodborne, or it can be direct transmission via fingers or fomites or dirt, which can be ingested by children. Many children have pica. They take mud or they eat a piece of, the thing lying on the ground. Some food falls on the ground. It is coated with dust and the child puts it. Even me and you, sometimes we have a tasty food in our hand and something falls down. We look here and there and we put it in the mouth, right? Jokes apart, we should not be, doing all this. So direct transmission is via fingers, but mostly it is water and foodborne. Individuals primarily responsible for transmission are those with poor personal hygiene, I did not stress on that, and who fail to cleanse contaminated hands and carry organisms under their fingernails after defecation. Please remember, as a responsible medical officer in the government or otherwise, in case you are in charge of a mess or a cookhouse or a hostel, you must inspect the food handlers on a regular basis. You must. You should lay down an SOP and inspect them once a month, get their stool tested, see their hygiene by making them stand in front of you and let them put their hands in front of you and check their nails. A cook or a chef cannot have long fingernails. He should get the fingernails trimmed. As far as the hair is concerned, he should be wearing a cap. You think the chef, they wear this tall cap because of style? No. It is because of hair falling on the food. So all this has got a hygiene aspect. Therefore, we must, as responsible medical officers, check the personal hygiene of people preparing the food in the house or in the hostel or wherever you are staying. And if you prepare your own food, please remember your nails should be trimmed, you should be washing your hands before, and you should be maintaining a spick and span personal hygiene. Water. The organisms of bacillary dysentery do not thrive in water, and chlorination readily kills those which may be present. If you have remembered the chapter on environment, which was covered perhaps in your third semester, I'm not sure, you have read about chlorination. However, contaminated water is believed to play a major role in the transmission of amoebiasis. Remember, the spores or the amoeba, the disease-carrying spores are there in the contaminated water. And sometimes or oftentimes chlorination cannot kill them. Boiling is the other option, but then it's a costly option. The cysts or the spores are not killed by chlorine in amounts normally added for water disinfection. Water can be rendered free from cyst only by filtration. That's why we have taught you about rapid sand and slow sand filters. If you go to the Hyderabad Metropolitan Waterworks, you will find huge rapid sand filters there. They are filtering the water, which is the second part after storing. And then they are sending the water for chlorination before supplying it to the houses, what we call as Manjira water, right? So therefore, there is chlorination as a process which comes third. Before chlorination, we have a process called as filtration. And that is where these cysts can be filtered. Chlorination kills a couple of bacteria. May not be all viruses, but then we don't have a viable economic solution other than chlorine. Milk and food are contaminated by infections or by hands of a carrier or case, and more likely by flies and cockroaches which act as vehicles. Many of us are afraid when we see a cockroach in the house. We don't kill it, we run away. We got to exterminate them. We got to eradicate them from our house. No fly can enter our house because we have the wire meshing. We don't have garbage in front of the house because the flies love garbage. So therefore, we must avoid flies and cockroaches which contaminate the milk and the food, besides, of course, our hand and our hygiene. Contamination of crockery, cutlery, kitchen utensils by food handlers. Remember, I talked about food handlers a while back, or by dust containing cysts in case of Entamoeba histolytica is a possibility. So please remember, everything around you, including your crockery, cutlery, your hands, and the the various organisms coexisting with us in the house should be looked after. The flies should be eliminated. The cockroaches cannot enter your house. Sometimes we have vermin also, okay? And they urinate. So please remember, all these things cannot be there in a healthy house. Vegetable from fields irrigated with polluted water and sometimes chemicals, especially those cultivated with raw sewage. You don't see the farmer out there, how he's irrigating his fields. It can be polluted water. It can be some sewage water which is running it through his fields. So therefore, it is improper sewage farming which is likely to contaminate the vegetables which are growing in that field. And you are buying them and you are cutting them, making them into your curry and eating them. Therefore, it is often advised that we wash the vegetables once we get them from the market yard by a normal bleaching solution. We have some bleaching powder in the house. We put it in the water and we wash the vegetables with that, let them dry. And after that, you can again have a wash with plain water and then cook them. Incubation period are different, obviously, because there are so many causative agents. Bacillary dysentery, usually 1 to 2 days. That means in a day or two of having the Shigella, you may get the amoebic dysentery, or you may get the bloody dysentery. Amoebic dysentery, usually about few days to several months, could be about a month. So incubation periods, they vary. That's why I have not dealt with it so much, because when we come down to your specifics, when we talk about cholera and we talk about typhoid and all these things, we will talk specifically about the incubation period. Prevention and control. The most important part of this chapter is prevention and control. The effective control of these diseases is by treating the reservoir of infection, that is patients, including carriers and contacts, and breaking channels of transmission by controlling water, milk, and food, and safe disposal of excreta. Remember, what we are talking about in COVID, social distancing and masks and hand hygiene, is to break the channel of transmission, right? So we got to break the channel of transmission in every disease. It cannot go from point A to point B to point C. We have to break it between A and B, between B and C. That's how we contain an epidemic or an outbreak or a disease, right? So the effective control of these diseases is by treating the reservoir of infection, that is patients. Attention to personal hygiene. I'm stressing this again and again. You may find it very peculiar because all of you know about it, but when it comes to practice, you will stress this on the patient perhaps a little bit more than the medical treatment part. Because if I am, practicing hand hygiene, I am protecting my food against flies and rodents and cockroaches, and I'm using the available immunization procedures, I can always reduce these excremental diseases. Therefore, please remember, the target of prevention and control is man, and we got to break the channels of transmission. The very important part, besides ORS, are personal hygiene, protection of foods against flies, rodents, and cockroaches, and all these organisms which carry the organisms of gastroenteritis with them, and the use of available immunization procedures. We have vaccines against cholera, we have vaccines against typhoid, so we must use them. Continuing with the prevention and control, the WHO, as early as 1980, that's about 40 years back, had a diarrheal diseases control program, and they mentioned some short-term and some long-term measures. Okay, these are very important because you got to know about these. The short-term measures, as somebody rightly pointed out, is the sheet anchor of clinical management, and that is oral rehydration therapy. We also have IV rehydration in case the patient can't take orally and is serious. We have a maintenance therapy after the patient has been brought back to near normal. We maintain the hydration. We have appropriate feeding technology, breastfeeding, weaning. We got to tell the mother how to put the child to breast, when to breastfeed, when to wean, what all to give, when to stop breastfeeding, when to start complementary feeding, and all these things. We should be an expert because a lot depends on a medical officer like you. Chemotherapy is, of course, limited to maybe some antibiotics, and the most important, lastly, but not so, you cannot neglect it, is zinc supplementation. So these are the 6 short-term methods which you must mug. ORT, ORT and IV rehydration, you remember. Maintenance therapy, almost the same. So ORT, IV, maintenance therapy. Added to this is appropriate feeding, which is, of course, includes breastfeeding, chemotherapy, and zinc. Long term, of course, what the government should do is better MCH care practices. MCH is mother and child health. Preventive strategies, of course, we have discussed a few of them. We will talk about a couple of policies in the end, and the government's preparedness to prevent epidemics, right? So these are long-term measures. We can't do much about it being in a hospital or being a singular doctor. We can't do much about it being a medical student. That is up to the government and up to us to follow the policies. But what we can do is follow the short-term measures and give relief to a patient. Very important from the practical point of view. You will get questions in your clinical postings, the practical exams as well as in theory. Please remember, ORT, the aim is to prevent dehydration and reduce mortality. One of you rightly pointed out, and many of you must be knowing but not speaking, ORT is a sheet anchor of diarrheal treatment. Okay, without ORT, which was discovered early 70s by, a Bangladeshi doctor, and I often say, had he been in the western part of the world, perhaps he would have got a Nobel Prize in medicine. Since in the eastern side, we are all third world, we are not, seen in that light. But it's a wonder drug which has saved perhaps millions of children from dying. The basis is that it contains glucose, which enhances intestinal absorption of water and salt, right? Glucose enhances intestinal absorption of water and salt, what we lose in diarrhea. Thus, it is correcting the water and electrolyte deficits in our body. Therefore, even as an adult, we can take ORT. When we have some kind of diarrhea, we are losing water and salt, we can quickly replace it with the glucose in ORT. The recent or the new ORS contains trisodium citrate instead of sodium bicarbonate. When I was a student, I studied ORS with sodium bicarbonate. You are studying ORS with trisodium citrate. This trisodium citrate, after years of research, has been introduced in early 2000s in the world, and India implemented it in 2004, the first country in the world to do so. Is more stable and results in less stool output. Once the product is more stable, you can use it over a period of time. You can keep it in the house and it doesn't get spoiled. And once it results in less stool output, it also means that your body is losing less water and salt, right? As this has a direct effect on intestinal absorption of water and sodium. Remember, we will ask you in the viva, or you will have to write it in the exam, why trisodium citrate. The new ORS recommended by UNICEF was first launched in India in June 2004. I just told you about it. It is called as reduced osmolarity ORS or ORS citrate. Reduced osmolarity ORS. Please remember this, and it contains the following things, right? Sodium chloride 2.6 gram per liter, trisodium citrate 2.9 grams, potassium chloride 1.5 grams, glucose 13.5 grams. Total weight, if you add these things, it comes to 20.5. This, ladies and gentlemen, you will have to mug up, because oftentimes there will be a short note on ORS, or it can be reduced osmolarity ORS. You need not remember sodium 75 millimoles per liter chloride, but if you are a good student, you remember that also, because it is not much of an ask. Total weight of ORS is 20.5 grams. In ORS bicarbonate, which I read about, sodium bicarbonate or Na2CO3 was present in place of trisodium citrate. Please remember, sodium chloride, potassium chloride, and glucose have retained their position. Except for bicarbonate, we have replaced it with trisodium citrate. Solution has to be made fresh daily by dissolving in 1 liter of potable water and used within 24 hours. The spelling of within is wrong. It cannot be boiled or sterilized. Please remember, this is a question which we will ask you many a time. How do you prepare the ORS? Your job does not end by just saying, take ORS and give it to the child. Okay? It also involves telling the mother that you have to prepare the ORS in so and so fashion. Your job, ends after telling her that take any water and then prepare the ORS. It need not be boiled, it should not be boiled, it can be the water that we drink. Solution to be made fresh daily by dissolving 1 liter of potable water and used within 24 hours. The water should not be boiled or sterilized. After 24 hours, if you have prepared a bottle and the child has taken half a bottle, the half a bottle should be discarded, and tomorrow or the next day, fresh ORS solution should be prepared. Very important. Besides that, we have often seen our mothers giving us home available fluids when we have diarrhea, because most of us do not keep ORS in the house. ORS is readily available in all PHCs, free of cost, and also in chemist shops where it is not free of cost. If it is not available, a simple mixture containing a table salt of 5 grams, okay, a pinch of salt and sugar, 1 fistful, that is 20 grams, dissolved in 1 liter of drinking water may be used. How do you tell the mother 1 liter of drinking water? Tell her, take a PET bottle with which you store water in the house, that is 1 liter bottle. Things which we buy in the railway station or we often buy in the shops to keep water in the house. So 1 liter of water, pour that in a vessel, mix a pinch of salt and about 6 level teaspoonfuls of sugar and prepare your homemade ORS, right? That is called as home available fluids. Fluids with salt and those without salt. Example, rice water, soups, yogurt drinks, coconut water, light tea, okay? These are supposed to be given to the child, or even we can take. What is important here is that those drinks, that is rice water and soups, they don't have salt, so you must add a little bit of salt to make it tastier, as well as to give your body salt which you have lost because of diarrhea. The last line is very important. Sweetened drinks with sugar, that is commercial beverages, the colas, the fruit juices, like these, fruit tea and all that, sweetened tea and stimulant diuretics or purgatives like coffee, okay, medium strength tea or infusions are best avoided. We can take light tea. See, I have written here light tea, but you should not have a little strong tea, okay, when you have diarrhea. And we have coconut water, we have yogurt drinks, all these things we have taken when we were small children, our mothers gave us. So home available fluids is also an important part of oral rehydration therapy. Please remember this. It can be an exam or a viva question. To assess dehydration, I did not teach you. All of you have gone to medical, medicine clinics, and you have seen a case of dehydration perhaps. We see the appearance, we see the radial pulse, we check the BP, we see the skin elasticity, okay? We pinch the skin of the child. We tell the child to put out the tongue. We, palpate the anterior fontanelle, and we check for the urine output. These are the things that we assess in case we are assessing a child for dehydration. Okay? In case the percentage of body loss is about 5%, you start getting worried. And if it is 5 to 10% or more, you should be really worried, because the patient may go into severe dehydration. The estimated fluid deficit also must be calculated. We will come to a little bit of detail about that a little later. And you must classify the patient as mild, moderate, or severe. And here is the table which is taken from see weight your own. You empty a blood vessel and you see how soon the blood vessel fills up. Pulse, respiration, respiratory rate in a child. We talked about it during ARI days. Okay, we have taught you about ARI. Blood pressure, you tell him to put out the tongue. Mucous membranes, whether the child has got tears at the corners of the eyes. In case they are present, that means the child is still hydrated. Look at the eyes, the sheen of the eyes. Pinch the skin, check for the fontanelle, and also ask the nursing officer, or you can yourself check for the urine output, or you can ask the mother. So these are the various things which you must check. Classification of dehydration severity by WHO is no dehydration, some dehydration, and severe dehydration. So you can say no, mild, and severe. Whereas here we have divided it into mild, moderate, and severe. In your book, it is only mild and severe. You can go by that. Okay, but it is very important to assess the child. If the child's weight is known, the amount of water solution required for rehydration during the first 4 hours may be calculated by setting the deficit at approximately 75 ml per kg body weight. Very important. In case you know the child's weight, during the first 4 hours, the child must get fluid 75 milliliter per kg body weight. The child is 10 kgs in weight, must get 750 ml of fluid in the first 4 hours. You got to pump in, right? But in case you don't know the child's weight and you have an emergency here, this is a rough calculation of how much you should give age-wise. This is given in your book, okay? Less than 4 months, 4 to 11 months, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 4 years, and even 15 years or more is me and you. We are obviously 30 kgs plus, and therefore we should take about, 3 to 4 packets of ORS per day. One packet, 1000 milliliter, right? So in case of a child who is less than 4 months, less than 5 kg body weight is approximate, we must give him half a packet or about a little less than half a packet of ORS in the first 4 hours. Remember this. This is a very, very important table which will come of use when you are faced with a clinical situation. Amount depends on patient's desire to drink, right? Amount depends on patient's desire to drink, and we have to monitor the patient's dehydration. Older children and adults can be given as much of water as they want in addition to ORS. In under 2 years, when the child cannot take the fluid by holding a cup, 1 teaspoonful every 1 to 2 minutes should be given. Try to give estimated fluid in 4 hours. I've stressed that before. After every loose stool, give or pump in 100 ml more, right? These are the small intricacies that you must know as a good doctor to treat a case of diarrhea. Older 2 to 10 years, you need not worry because you can put a cup in the child's hand and he or she will drink. In case the child vomits, please wait and try again. Don't give up. You give him a teaspoonful every 2 to 3 minutes. Increase the frequency, increase the time period. No harm if child wants more. In case you have calculated a certain dose and you think that the child wants more, please give it. Vomiting should not be a contraindication. If the child refuses and if signs and symptoms of rehydration appear, please remember you have been successful in rehydrating the child. Resume treatment for non-dehydrated diarrhea child. That we will just talk about the antibiotics and zinc supplementation. Breastfeeding has to continue and you must know the correct position and the procedure of breastfeeding, and you must advise the mother. Sometimes the mother may be breastfeeding the child, but she doesn't know the correct procedure and how much to give, and therefore the child continues to have diarrhea or the problems. Mothers to be taught or demonstrated how to administer the complementary food and the ORS by the health worker. I need not stress on that. Now, short-term clinical management, we come to IV rehydration. The aim is to prevent dehydration and reduce mortality. Again, the same thing. Usually required only in severe dehydrated patients, perhaps in shock or unable to drink, and the patient has to be admitted. You can't give IV rehydration in a domiciliary background or in a domiciliary situation. The recommended solutions, please remember, is RL, Ringer's lactate, and diarrhea treatment solution or DTS. If these are not available, the third best is normal saline. Never ever give plain glucose or dextrose, right? So please ask the sister or the nurse to keep Ringer lactate ready in a ward when you become a ward MO, because you can expect a case of diarrhea, especially a pediatric ward, or you keep DTS and normal saline. The dose is 100 ml per kg body weight, right? We had talked about 75 ml per kg body weight ORS. We have increased it to 100 now, and you got to examine the patient at frequent intervals. In case the child is an infant, the first 30 ml per kg has to be given in the first hour. We talk about a golden period in case of head injury or whatever. We have talked about a golden hour in case of diarrhea. In the first 1 hour, give 30 ml per kg body weight pump in. In older children, that is 1 year and above, the same thing should be given in the first 30 minutes. I have seen many cases of diarrhea in my younger days as a medical officer before I became a specialist. Please remember, this had to be given every time. We had to write it down in a piece of, carry it in our pockets in case we had to treat a case of diarrhea, because we will just refer and see the body weight of the patient and then immediately start treatment as per the body weight. 70 ml per kg is given in the next 5 or the next 2.5 hours. Please remember this table. This is given in your book. I have reduced it to a small table in one page, but it's a very, very important table, including the previous one, which I showed you about ORS. Once the child you feel is responding to treatment, we stop, the aggressive therapy as we call it, and we go in for maintenance therapy. After initial fluid and electrolyte deficit has been corrected, we go for maintenance therapy. Okay, and amount of diarrhea in case it is mild, we have just told you what is mild diarrhea, more than say 1 stool every 2 hours or less than 5 ml per kg per hour, okay, is the urine output. And in case of severe diarrhea, it is more than 1 stool every 2 hours or more than 5 ml per kg per hour is the loss. Sorry, it's not the urine output, it's the loss of water. Okay, amount of oral fluid, 100 ml per kg body weight per day until diarrhea stops. So we got to continue the maintenance therapy for a few days. And the dosage again remains like the IV rehydration, 100 ml per kg body weight. In case of severe diarrhea, you got to replace stool volume for volume. You got to ask the nursing officer about the patient how much of stool has been passed. She will say 1 liter. So you got to replace 1 liter. Okay, and if you can't measure it, then it should be about 10 to 15 ml per kg body weight per hour. It is not per day, it is per hour. So these things you got to mug up. I can teach it as fast as I can because time is limited in a class. I can run through it and I can forget about it. But you are exam going people. You got to remember the dosage. In case of ORS, the first 4 hours. In case of IV rehydration, the first 1 hour or the half an hour. In case of older children, and 5 hours and 2.5 hours, 30, 70. And in case of maintenance therapy, 100 ml per kg body weight per day, or say about 10 ml per kg body weight per hour in case of severe diarrhea. That's how you replace the fluids. And you know the kind of fluids that we prefer. That is Ringer's lactate, DTS, and normal saline, in that order. Appropriate feeding, I did not tell you much. I have talked about it too many times over the course of the last half an hour. Chemotherapy, we have, clear-cut cases of Shigella, we can give him a Cipro. Typhoid or cholera is treated with Doxy or Tetra or Septran or Erythro, right? So we have specific antibacterials for the bacterial cases of diarrhea in case they are lab confirmed. But otherwise, we can blindly give one or two antibiotics, assuming that it's a case of bacterial diarrhea. Zinc supplementation, talked about it in the end, but is the most important thing in a way. It is to reduce duration, severity, and possibility in the next 2 to 3 months. The same patient, you can treat him, he goes back and comes back the next day with diarrhea. So the dosage of zinc should be 10 milligram for less than 6 months of age and 20 milligrams for more than 6 months age baby for about 10 to 14 days. This is what is recommended by the WHO. Please do not forget to give a patient of diarrhea or the mother of the patient with diarrhea ORS packets, some antibiotic in case you feel the child is a case of moderate diarrhea or something, or may go into dehydration or has got more frequency of stools, and also remember to give zinc tablets. The long-term measures I need not stress, but they are what the government should do. Better MCH care practices. They should look after the mother. There are so many national policies, Janani Suraksha and all that you've read, and safe child survival and safe motherhood program, which is now the RCH, our reproductive and child health program. We have got so many programs to promote breastfeeding, appropriate weaning, supplementary feeding, and of course vitamin A supplementation, which starts from 9 months of age to reduce deaths from diarrhea. We have talked about vitamin A also during ARI. The long-term treatment to continue, we have to have preventive strategies in place like sanitation, what the municipality should do, fly control, health education. We should make everybody aware, especially the ignorant, and we should ensure that a child gets the vaccines on time, including measles and rotavirus vaccines. Rotavirus vaccines, recently introduced in the National Immunization Schedule, can be of two types, mono or penta. Now it is included in the pentavalent. It is safe, efficacious, and we have a 3-dose schedule of 6, 10, and 14 weeks. We remember to give it with the oral polio, right? So it's a live attenuated oral vaccine that can be given as an injection also. We have to prevent epidemics. We have to have epidemiological investigations, notification processes, and set our primary health care and control programs in place. So therefore, long-term measures are a little vague, and they are not pertaining to us as much as the short-term, which consists of ORT, IV rehydration, maintenance therapy, zinc supplementation, complementary feeding and breastfeeding, as well as some antibiotics. Please remember those 6, mug them up by heart, remember the dosages. Just give me 2 more minutes. We have come to the end of this very, very important chapter where we have a diarrheal diseases control program which was started in 1978. In 85 and 86, it was renamed as National ORT Program, Oral Rehydration Therapy Program. The focus was on case management in under 5s, improving mothers' knowledge related to home available fluids and use of ORS and continued feeding. Very important, you may add it as a one line when you finish your long answer. It could be asked in the Viva. If you are asked about some national programs, you can always talk about the diarrheal diseases control program. If there is a national program, there has to be an international one also by the WHO and UNICEF. And that is called as Integrated Global Plan for Prevention and Control of Pneumonia and Diarrhea. It's called as GAPPD. Those who will recollect, when we talked to you about ARI, we also talked about this program in this slide, right? GAPPD is a cohesive approach of critical services and interventions to control pneumonia or ARI and diarrhea. There are certain goals which have been set. I cannot read them again and again because they have been talked to you in a previous class. Goals for 2025, 5 years from now, we got to reduce mortality due to pneumonia, diarrhea to so-and-so figures. If you can remember one or two, please mention. If you can't remember, just remember there's something called as GAPPD, which also wants to improve vaccine coverage, improve access to appropriate management of diarrhea and pneumonia, increase access to, or you can say promote exclusive breastfeeding. EBF is exclusive breastfeeding, and eliminate pediatric HIV. By 2030, there should be universal access to basic drinking water, adequate sanitation facilities, hand washing facilities, clean and safe energy techniques. Perhaps COVID has helped us accelerate the process a little bit, and we are now washing our hands and maintaining some kind of sanitation, wearing a mask, and of course, taking chlorinated water. I hope all of you have learned a little bit about diarrhea. You must read the chapter a little bit when I give it to your class reps to give it to you. Reading a topic beforehand helps you grasp it in a much, much easier and better fashion. Okay? So we end the class of diarrhea here. In the next class of intestinal infections, we may go into cholera or something. I'll intimate you. It's about 3-4 pages, 5 pages in the book. Please read it, and the chapter becomes easier for you instead of listening to my one-sided conversation and dozing off or doing some other household jobs with your internet on. You think we don't know? We know. But please concentrate. These are diseases not only important from the exam point of view, they are also going to make you a good doctor, because when you treat a patient with a simple thing like ORS and the mother comes and thanks you, or you see the baby recovering, it gives you a different kind of pleasure. Okay, class, all the best. The lockdown has almost ended in Hyderabad. We are back to almost normal life. Shops have opened. Those who stay here, they know about it. Those who are from outside, they will also know about it through pics or pictures that your friends send you. But still, stay home, follow all the practices, and prevent yourself from this deadly disease of COVID. Thank you.
This conference is no longer being recorded.